Hello and welcome back to the Angelati studio. I'm joined now by Andreas Umbach, who is the CEO of Landis+Gyr. Andreas, welcome.
Thank you.
Second time around, we did this
Yes.
last year, so welcome back into the studio. And I wanted to congratulate you firstly, Landis+Gyr. I'm sure you had some personal involvement, but there's probably a bigger team behind that on the two wins you announced recently. Just tell us a little bit about, you must be excited about that.
Absolutely. 2013 has been a great year. There were, if you look around the globe, there were two mega deals to be won this year. TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, has made a selection about a technology, was ours. And the second one, which is the largest in the industry's history, is British Gas in the UK, and both selected Landis+Gyr, and that was not my job, that was my team's job, and there's a hard amount of work and many years of R&D work related to that, so we're very excited about that. Other than that, we also feel that the industry is pausing a little bit, and there's large uncertainty for utilities, and that reflects in their investment attitude.
And that pause is, there was an earlier interview with and we were discussing this off air with KG Technologies, who manufacture the relays, and I always find that the lowest common part is an indicator of what's happening out there. So the pause is, the US is in a slowdown, I gather, in terms of investment, and in Europe we've got the issue of, we've got a deadline, we've got 2020, but we've got an economic dip. And is that what's causing the conflict, or are there other things?
Let me comment on the US first.
Yeah.
It is a slowdown, but actually it's a natural process. We have reached propagation of smart meters in the range of 60 to 70%, and the remaining utilities are simply taking a longer time frame to execute it. So companies like ours have a lot of large projects, but also some of our competitors, when those large projects finish, your revenue base goes down, so we're being affected by that too. In Europe, as you said, there's a 2020 deadline, but there's very little action to meet that deadline. So every year we're looking at it and we feel that certain investments are being postponed. The economic uncertainty is definitely one factor. If you look at the Mediterranean countries and the economic situation there, you can't blame a utility to be cautious and be a little bit slower with investments. But it's not only that. There's a second element of uncertainty, which is around energy policy in general, and that affects Germany and many other markets where utilities or executives about to make decisions about investments can no longer properly rely on a political framework. They feel uncomfortable making big bets now because they don't know whether the rules are going to be changing in the next years. And that part we feel a lot stronger than the economic uncertainty.
So that's interesting, because that's one of those things where, again, you know, when I first started looking at this market, I was like going, well, this is quite a unique market. You're not dealing with a commodity in the true sense of the word, where the political framework can stay away from it. It is a very political commodity, to put it that way. And that threat of intervention, what does that need? Does it need more, as Germany would probably argue, more EU cohesive strategy? You know, is that one of our issues, that we've got all these different markets? We've got the UK, which is a very different market to some of the other areas.
I don't know. I don't think we need that much clarity at the European level. We need stability and clear commitments country by country. It doesn't help if you introduce, whether it's right or wrong, you introduce subsidies for, call it photovoltaic and wind, and people or companies make investments, and 3 years later they pick up a debate whether we should stop those subsidies. For whatever reasons. It's that type of uncertainty that is no good. The energy policies across Europe are quite different. Look at the attitude of Germany towards nuclear and compare it with France. And we don't have a problem with them being different. What they need to be is clear, and there needs to be a long-term commitment so that the industry and all of its players, and particularly investors, can make clear decisions and know where the journey is going to. And that will facilitate investments.
And that's one of the other points, isn't it? Because when we're looking at and I haven't been coming to Utility Week as long as probably you have, but even last year I got a sense of a lot of companies going, hey, we're ready for the investment, we're ready for the investment. But if you constantly have this sort of looming thing about, oh, the rules can be changed. So how do you depoliticize that? Because that's one of the biggest things. Because when you think about energy investments, you're thinking 10, 15-year timescales. When politicians think, they think well, in our case, they think 5 years now that we've sorted out the time span, but in other countries, it's even shorter than that.
I think one of the challenges in the energy sector, and that's a challenge the entire industry has, not only utilities but also their suppliers, it's quite a sophisticated topic, and it is not easy to explain it in 3 sentences. And that makes life for a politician very, very difficult. It is not just a market, you can say free market and the economic forces will work it out in competition. It is very sophisticated, it affects countries' infrastructure. Think about generation from large power plants to small things like photovoltaic or wind. Think about the high voltage grid that you need across the country. By nature, that is a monopoly. People don't like high tension wires these days, distribution networks. And then you have the retail utilities, which can be and should be very competitive. If you want to introduce fundamental changes to that system, call it smart grid, you need to have all of those players interact with each other and set the rules for them. And that's what makes it so sophisticated.
And where, so that goes back to another conversation where sometimes we obsess too much about electricity, but actually what we're talking about is energy. Where when you start thinking about the world in that way, you start thinking slightly differently, like things like power to gas, where people have suddenly, actually, if we've got all this spare electricity, we can generate hydrogen. And so now people are thinking about an energy framework. And does that get us somewhere closer to a tipping point into smart grid investment? Because I would imagine if you want to be non-reliant, like Germany said, no more nuclear, almost overnight. It wasn't that quick, but almost overnight. In the UK, we've got an over-reliance on gas, so we're beholden to wholesale gas prices. If you want to move away from and have a diversified energy portfolio, do we need to really make a collective conscious investment into the smart grid?
Very well said, and I fully agree with you.
Yeah.
If you look at a household, you need to look at its entire energy consumption. Some people would argue you also have to throw mobility into that. That is, as an engineer or economically, absolutely right. The challenge we have with that is then you make life even more complicated, because then you're in the world of the electric utilities and the gas utilities. In some cases, like in the UK, you have combinations. British Gas is a very good example, but across Europe, that's an exception. So as much as we like the fact that we're defining the space wider and we including gas or heating in general, also oil, but maybe even water, while in principle like that, it makes the execution of what we're about to deploy even more sophisticated, because then you have to even get competing utilities to work with each other. And how do you get them to share a telecommunications infrastructure, for example?
That's a tough job.
Yeah.
So when you look at that market, and you know, we've met 2 times now, and you obviously in your job you have to be a market watcher because you're looking ahead. And I also sense a palpable desire for the vendors in the space to get on with it. You know, we want to know where we are. We want to know where the next contracts are going to be, which is natural. Yeah. What do you see as some of the key? If you had your way, what would you do in the next 12 months to move things along?
Well, if I had my way, I'll be selling a lot more gear and technology to my customers. But coming back to the point, we are privileged in the sense that we're sitting in a spot where investments is actually happening, call it smart meters. And we're even more privileged by the fact that we have an owner, Toshiba, who thinks very long-term and has a lot of interest in technologies. And with them, we're preparing for smart grid. And if I had one wish, I wish smart grid became reality quicker. It's all about timing. We went through that in the smart metering phase. We got very excited many, many years ago and invested very early, probably too early. We're now benefiting from that. We're exactly in the same space in smart grid, except that it's even more fragmented, more complicated, and many more different technologies. There's no one smart grid solution across the globe. You mentioned Germany with renewables. It's a different requirement than in the country next door, where there might be more emphasis on classical energy generation.
So are we going to get sort of pockets of smart grids?
Absolutely.
And then the challenge will be to make sure that all these pockets are built on the same sort of interoperability so they can join up? Or because I think that
Absolutely.
grand project idea doesn't sit well anywhere.
No, because the political ambitions are quite different. A country might bet on renewables, someone else might be putting an emphasis on electric vehicles. Others are looking at what they consume in the heating space and want to reduce their emissions because of that. And we are very well prepared to address those individual or country-specific requirements. I do not think it requires a European-wide solution, for example. Having said that, interoperability and the impact that all of this has on each other is absolutely key too.
Can I ask you a theoretical question? We just before your interview started, we had a panel with Wolfgang Haas from Siemens and Ole Langnes from Finchner, and I put together a theoretical concept of building East Street. And we ended up with in a world where we decided that East Street would set up its own aggregator and build some of its own smart grid infrastructure. That's not the point, but that's where we ended up. But the question to you is, can you see a company like Landis+Gyr and Toshiba actually going direct to communities like our hypothetical East Street and saying, listen, we'll build it for you. We'll become your aggregator and we'll manage it. And it is a very hypothetical question, but because one of the stumbling blocks we came across in our debate, and we're trying to put ourselves in the shoes of consumers, is we don't have the technical know-how. Yet there are a lot of companies here who do have the technical know-how, who could forge those partnerships and start creating those pockets.
What you're describing there, Toshiba refers to its smart community vision.
Right.
Where you take a city, a district.
I didn't read it beforehand.
It's all integrated, all communicates with each other.
Right.
Technology-wise, not a problem. The concept is clear too. The challenge that we have, and here's the missing link, is our customer. In theory, the mayor of a city would be the ideal customer for such an all-embracing smart grid solution. The problem is that mayors tend to be very poor people. You have elements like rail systems, transportation. Sometimes they're part of the city, sometimes not. Getting all those players to agree on something, that's the biggest challenge. So I always say that the reason things take longer is because of the requirements of so many different parties to play with each other, interact with each other, and have clear frameworks. It's not an issue about technology. We can automate all of that you can buy today.
Yeah. And that's where we get to the rub of it, isn't it? It's so complex that, getting onto that. And can I give you another small challenge? I'm going to throw this at you. For a second, I'm going to give you my job, and you're a roving reporter, because unfortunately for this morning, I've been in here, and you've probably enjoyed some of the conference sessions and things like that. What would you pick out as a little highlight, or have you seen anything that's that's?
The highlight, if anything, is something we saw last year also. It's amazing number of players and the size of and background of these companies. I mean, from energy management, energy measuring, all the way to communication software. You have all, and even the chipsets, the technology players, they're all here. It just shows the maturity this industry has. And if you're a customer utility willing to make investments, you have many, many choices. The discussion should move away from technology and whether it's reliable or not and what it costs, more to what are we trying to achieve. Let's start with the customer. What is the benefit and the functionality we want to offer to our end customer, to residential customers? What is a vision of the future, and which further functionality we want to anticipate? Let's define what impact it has then on utilities and their processes, and then move back and see whether the technology that we have
is... That's an interesting shift, isn't it? You're going solution focused because you know the tech's there.
Yeah, we started with the technology because it was critical. It was too expensive, it was not reliable, we didn't know. That's 5-10 years ago. It's there, it works, you can travel the world and see how it works. We have read rates of 99.9xx%. It works, the proof point is behind us. We need to shift to solution thinking, starting with the customer.
Perfect, and on that note, we'll end it. Great job in terms of being the reporter. Thank you as well for watching. It's been another Angerati interview, and as ever, you can see this interview as well as all of the conference sessions on demand on Angerati later, not now, in about 2 weeks' time. Thank you for watching.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.